Welcome everybody then to final session in track 1. Very interesting title again, Building Better Worlds, Developing an Online Unit to Support the Needs of Next Generation Learners. And we're joined by John Vivolo of Katz School of Science and Health, Yeshiva University. So welcome, John. But just before you start, a reminder that changes in structure catalyzed by online education, from intellectual property and copyright to costs and budgets, with the University of Texas at Arlington, is taking place now in track 2. But welcome, John. Thank you very much for joining us. We're really looking forward to hearing your presentation.
Thank you very much, Lynn, and thank you everybody for joining me for our last session. The term next generation learners is interesting. I've actually argued with my wife about what that means. I just want to be clear that I look at next generation learners as people who are possibly going into college in the next 5 or 10 years, that as those of us who are experts in online learning, I've been doing this for almost 20 years, we have to start preparing for their needs 5 or 10 years now for them 5 or 10 years down the road. And a lot of those needs have changed suddenly in the last year. And this presentation will reflect on that as well. But before we do that, let us take a moment of reflection. And I want you to take 15 seconds and remember these 2 moments in 2020. The moment when you realized your institution or organization would need to close and go completely online, which most did. The moment when your institution's leadership decided they needed to close and go completely online. Of course, you may be part of leadership, you may not be, but it could be the same thing. But just take 15 seconds and put yourself back in that mindset. Okay, I think that was about 15 seconds, which is a long time on these sessions, it feels like. At any time, by the way, you can put comments or questions in the chat or Q&A area, and we'll be getting to them at the end. Got about 5 or so minutes for that at the end. So as you put yourself in that mindset, before we can talk about the future, we have to talk about the things that we have to prepare for now. Were you prepared when COVID-19 pandemic shut down your school or your organization? And were you prepared to turn everything online? That doesn't include just faculty and students, but also includes staff, administrators, people who now have to work from home. I'm working from home. I'm in New York City, by the way, if you can't tell by my accent and my hand movements, which is a normal New Yorker thing. And are you prepared for the future? And I say this because it's not a question of if something like this will happen, but when it might happen again. I've lived through 3 times in New York City where we've had closures of businesses and universities. The 9/11 terrorist attacks were closed for a couple of weeks. The 2012 Hurricane Sandy, which hit New York and the East Coast of the United States and shut us down for, I think, close to a month, where faculty, staff, and students had to go home. And now, of course, COVID-19, where we've been home and had to turn everything online. For me, with COVID, my university was taking its steps towards online learning, specifically the Katz School, but we still didn't have a large infrastructure in place for supporting online learning. So they turned to people like me to help move everybody online fairly quickly. It was a difficult time for all of us, but now we've adapted. But as we think through the lessons we've learned, and my own experience working in two other organizations, educational organizations, in which I knew that we needed to focus on a unit to go online. But before we do that, let's talk about models of supporting online learning. Now, this is something I think you may be familiar with. Each organization, each university is a little bit different about how they've been doing it. When I was involved in online learning almost 20 years ago, it was an individual faculty who wanted to go online, and IT helped them out a little bit, but they had to do everything on their own. And that might still happen. You know, I want to turn my class online. Or an academic department says, we want to turn our degree online. And you don't usually have a lot of people who have experienced online learning in your institution that does that. Your school may be like this, maybe not. It's a decentralized look at it. The traditional sense that's centralized is where an individual unit or person or group of people come together, maybe an IT department, which is a little bit less common now, where the IT department helps promote online learning, gets people to go online, or a center for teaching and learning, or maybe a single person like a director or manager of online learning, or some 1 or 2 instructional design staff. It's centralized, but it's still only 1 or 2 people pushing that effort to go online. What I'm going to talk about now is a more non-traditional version, at least, where it's an online learning unit that's dedicated to helping the school going online. They don't report to anybody except for potentially the dean or the provost, and they work with the academic department. They work with the individuals. They work with all the Center for Teaching and Learning. They have instruction designers and so on, and they want to go online. And also something called an online learning rapid response team, which is a brand new thing that was a response to COVID, and I'll talk a lot about that, our response to COVID. So expectations, what do I mean about this? Well, next generation learners are people like my son. My son is 11 years old. He's in what we call middle school. He's finishing up 6th grade, and he'll be going to 7th grade. He grew up with technology. He's got an iPhone, he's got an iPad. When he wants to know how to do something, he looks it up on YouTube. He's generally interested in that stuff. He's interested in science and STEM. When he wants to know something about meteorology, which he's interested now, he'll look it up online. He may ask me, which I probably don't know, but he'll look it up online. Plus also, he's been exposed to online learning earlier than I thought he would be. Most people are exposed to online learning later on, maybe high school, most likely college, not necessarily people who are in the K to 12 grades, kindergarten to 12th grade, before they get into college. He has expectations now. Plus, the entire world has been exposed to online learning. The problem is we've got some really good stuff and some really not so good stuff. Some schools have been doing this for a long time. And they had time and money and expense and to develop courses online, and it would take us 20 weeks to develop a really good course online. And sometimes it was still things like PowerPoint and audio. And that's one of the things to think about. If you're still using PowerPoint and audio for your online classes, well, we've been doing that for 15 years. And students are going to come into schools 5-10 years from now who are now exposed more than ever to online learning and exposed to HD video and interactive things and social media. They have expectations for things like HD video and audio, not just PowerPoint or Zoom recordings. Flexibility, asynchronous plus synchronous, that it's a mix between these two. For good or bad, we've noticed the importance of these live Zoom sessions and whatever other WebEx technology that may exist. We've always used asynchronous, but now we have to add synchronous, but not too much. Because one of the lessons that we learned at Yeshiva at Katz, the Katz school, is that a 4 or 5 hour Zoom session is really not conducive to learning. And right away, students and faculty got exhausted from the experience. So a mix between asynchronous and synchronous is what people, next generation learners are going to be looking for. Not just synchronous, not just asynchronous, but a mix. But we need the time and effort to build that. Up to date on current industry trends. They want to know to make sure whatever degrees you're going to go into, that you're teaching that from that industry experts. We hear that all the time from students. I don't want to learn from an academic. I want to learn from someone who's worked for Google, who's worked for Facebook. Entertaining. This is a strange thing for some people to get, but there's a lot of competition now between the schools. So it wasn't like years ago where there was few online programs. A lot of people have online programs. So there needs to be some kind of entertainment value that's interesting. A boring professor, no matter how brilliant he or she may be, is not going to lead to conducive learning. There has to be some kind of entertaining. That could be in the design of the videos, in the design of the lectures, whatever it may be. Interactive, engaging, and community building, where a lecture isn't a passive thing, where students are clicking on things and interacting, maybe even gamifying things, using things like authoring tools like Articulate 360 or Adobe Captivate to engage people so they're not passively looking at stuff. Mobile accessible. This is a big one. We've been talking about this for years with online learning. It needs to be mobile accessible. But I still don't think we've reached that point where you can pick up your phone and do everything you can do on your desktop or your laptop. A student who rolls out of bed in the morning doesn't grab their textbook. They grab their phone, their iPad. And some countries have mostly mobile phones for doing things. And so if they don't have computers and they have mobile phones, it's got to be accessible. We've got to reach that point where everything works mobile. And live virtual learning, that's what I said, the synchronous things. Important to have Zoom, WebEx. But the way I view synchronous sessions is not necessarily for lectures in an academic course. You may do your asynchronous content, the discussion boards, view the lectures at your own time, do your assignments. But then I feel it's that moment when I have students, I say, all right, let's drop the anchor on this ship and stop for a second, and let's meet for an hour and just talk. Not me lecture, but us talk. Let's talk as a community and figure out what's going on. Let's work as a group and make sure we're on the right track. So these sessions are that drop the anchor moment, to stop the learning, to stop the asynchronous stuff and just talk and meet together live. And students are expecting that as well. And in order to meet these expectations, you need a central unit that is not under one department or an individual faculty or under IT, but something that's independent within the school. And they promote active, not passive learning. Not people who are just watching videos and that's it, but people who are actively engaging in conversations, group work, interactive modules, gamification, things that make it so that next generation students are enjoying the experience. Because if you have a student right now, like my son who's 11 and he's using Google Classroom and he's having some Zoom sessions and it's okay. And then he has the same thing 5 or 6 years from now when he goes to college, he's going to think, well, I thought in college it'd be better, but I'm getting the same sort of learning experience. Faculty and student technical and pedagogical support. So this unit doesn't provide IT support, but rather helps faculty and students get comfortable with things like using a particular e-learning authoring tool or using an LMS like Canvas, like we use. And then pedagogically for faculty, it's about partnering them with instructional designers and other people to say, okay, you've learned how to use a technology, you've learned what buttons to press, but have you learned how to be a good teacher using this technology? There's a difference between learning how to use a technology and learning how to use it to be a good teacher, teaching and learning we're talking about here. For students, it's more about making sure they're prepared to learn online. During orientation week we have before fall and spring, I often talk to students about what it's like to be an online student, to sit on your couch with your pajamas and you get to work on your laptop. Well, this is great, which sounds wonderful. But you know what? If you don't structure yourself and time yourself, it could be Sunday at 2 a.m. and you haven't done any work. I know because I work, I have family, I go to school as well for my doctorate. I'm almost done with that. So I have to balance my life out. And students don't always realize that when they don't have to be in the classroom. Marketing and recruitment for online learning. That means people who are in this unit know how to specifically market and recruit for online learners, not just on campus. Course development. This is people like instructional designers, educational technologists, videographers, editors, copywriters. Sometimes faculty have difficult writing their lectures, animators, whatever it takes to help develop a really enjoyable experience for students. So they feel like they're when they go to college, they're immersive learning experience. R&D, research and development for technology and pedagogy. In this group, there are people who go out of their way to go to conferences like this, talk to vendors, figure out, read the most recent research and publications and figure out what works best and apply that practically in this thing. Sometimes in schools, people don't take the time to do that. There's not someone whose job it is to research online technology. Course monitoring with analytics. This is not meant to be a big brother mentality where I'm watching what online faculty are doing, but I'm using the analytics so I can see where there are students or faculty who are struggling. Oh, I noticed in your discussion boards, this happened and this happened. Let me help you out and give you some advice, best practices. Let my staff help you out. So that faculty get accustomed to coming to this group to talk pedagogically, not just technologically. We can make sure those are two separate things. And they become the voice of online learning at the institution. That they're involved in every conversation, even strategic conversations, that they know and remind everybody, hey, don't forget about online learning. That online learning isn't seen as a secondary thing, it's a primary thing. And I think this last year has helped in a way online learning become more in a spotlight for good or bad. I wish it didn't happen this way, but it has happened. If you're involved in online learning now, I want to take this moment to say, if you support it in any way over the last year, you're the hero. You helped save this entire world educational systems. Because without you helping faculty and students going online, I don't know what would happen. What happens if this was 30 or 40 years ago and there was no internet? We would have just shut schools down, I guess. We don't really know. But you are the hero. Take the moment to pat yourself on the back. Online Learning Faculty Oversight Committee. We want to partner with faculty so they don't think that this group is just independent people that don't listen to faculty. Many schools are faculty governed. We want them to be able to talk to us about this experience and to give us insight about what we should and shouldn't be doing. So it's not like just this, we're this wild group doing what we want. Strategic planning for online learning. That's what I do all the time. I plan for 4 to 5 to 6 to 10 years in the future. And what I need to do is worry about what those students are going to be like in the future. I have to do that now. And that makes me think about where we are right now, and something I refer to as the online learning rapid response team. When COVID began, and the Yeshiva was one of the first schools in the United States to shut down. And we had that moment where we had some positives in the city, and a lot of schools started shutting down. And right away, the school turned to me and some other people in the school to, what do we do? How do we do this? And we worked pretty quickly. But we work in silos sometimes, all of us. We only think about our school, our needs, our resources. So the rapid response team has an internal version and an external version. The external version is people from other universities. And I'll talk about that in a minute. I don't want to jump ahead. So what is the online learning rapid response team? It's a group of remarkable people who can come together on short notice to fight the battles others never could in the wake of a catastrophic event. And yes, I did steal that a little bit from the Avengers. If you've ever seen those movies, basically it's like the online learning Avengers. And a catastrophic event is any event that disrupts the normal operations, academic or non-academic, of an institution for an extended period. Each person is uniquely selected to bring something to the team and provide triage and proactive thinking for the future. So triage is for that moment, what can we do, but also thinking a couple of years from now. And someone recently asked me, are you going to turn everything back on campus and forget about online learning mostly, hopefully when COVID ends in the next couple months to a year or two? I said, we're not going to go backwards. I said, we're going to keep doing on campus, sure. We're going to keep trying to push all the efforts we have now. So we have to talk about that now to prepare for the future, which is what the online learning unit does in conjunction with a rapid response team. Post-COVID, whatever that is, in New York City, it's getting a little better. Other places it's not. So hopefully a year from now, we'll have the same conversation and things will be better. But it should also be an ongoing collaboration. It doesn't have to revolve around a catastrophic event. It just happens to now, just to being able to collaborate with each other. And the good thing about the internal one is that you can cut through some of the bureaucracy when you have certain people on this team. And I'll talk about that in a moment. Externally, you can reach out to people and talk to people who may be your competitors. And the good thing about online learning in our industry is that we're always willing to talk to each other. Columbia, NYU, yes, they are competitors with my institution, but we're also collegial. I can call up the head of online learning for Columbia and NYU, who I know, and say, what are your thoughts on this? And what are you doing for this? And we share because we believe in that and we help each other out. And that's what a rapid response team, an external version, can be like. Let's talk about that actually. An internal versus external version. Remember, this is all connected to what you put in place now to prepare people for 5, 10 years in the future as well as handle what's happening right now in our world. Internal is an empowered group, people within the institution, vendors who are currently supporting the institution. We got a lot of great breaks and great discounts from vendors to help this out. Empowered to make decisions on how to address the catastrophic events. Get through some of that bureaucracy that exists in a lot of all institutions I've ever worked for, and a budget for immediate needs or for long-term needs if necessary. Excuse me. External team is an advisory team. Outside of your institution, there's no budget, no commitment, but this may be unique expertise not available internally, and that's what's great. I can reach out to someone who knows about this topic that nobody else knew about. Like virtual labs, nobody internally in my school knew about virtual labs. I was able to reach out to my external rapid response team, and someone gave me some great advice about using a vendor called Labster. But when you create your team, you have two types of people that you need. You may not think you need, but you need the gatekeepers and the guides. A gatekeeper is someone who is head of finance, IT, legal. These are people who want to make sure you're not going to put undue financial or technical pressure on a school. So a little bit more of a gatekeeper, but that's their job. They're supposed to do that. They want to make sure you're not going to endanger student data. So they want to make sure your program you want to use protects student data. A guide is someone like me who just wants to find their way, help you across the water and say, okay, try this, try that, try this. Let's find a way to solve this problem, even if it's unconventional. The internal team, especially the COVID-19 version that we ended up using, was a director of online education, which was my original title, but afterwards changed into also taking care of the Center for Teaching and Learning. So I do on-campus stuff as well now. Instructional designers. These are the guides, the people who are going to help you out, get you to try to problem solve what you need in the moment. And then we also had a CIO or an IT representative as a chief information officer and a director of finance. These are gatekeepers, but we have to make sure that the product we're using is safe for student data. We have to make sure something we're asking for isn't going to cost so much money that the school gets financially into trouble, and we handle it right. We have to think about cost of things as well. Student life coordinator, just someone in non-academic who is available to give us perspective of how students would handle something like this, as well as faculty representatives. Always want to have that, no matter what. You don't always want to be an administrator who doesn't work with faculty. Experience and sometimes not experienced in online learning. We want to hear their prospect, because it could be a lot of people in your school who never worked online, and we want their experience about what we choose to do. And grad students, this is interesting because we often forget that we want to sometimes involve grad students in some of the decision making, or at least get their thoughts on things, because they are already in this particular case, Katz is a grad school, or it could be undergrad, of course, as well. The roster is mostly consistent. Grad students change each semester. Funding, COVID-19 funding we needed for virtual labs, proctoring. I had to, because I had not finished building my online learning unit yet, I had to contract a whole bunch of instructional designers that I found externally from some great contacts. People gave me some names, and we recruited them for about a year. And then now deciding to see how many people we want to keep full-time. Meetings during COVID, during COVID's peak, at least in the United States and in New York City, we had weekly meetings. Now it's down to monthly. In the future, we'll see what happens. We'll probably meet, quarterly or something. This is all under the assumption that, COVID gets better soon. External team. This is a team that we also did. Anyone with online learning and educational technology experience. Anyone with higher education leadership experience, because we need those leaders to remind us not to think as just, the people in people doing the day-to-day stuff, or people who think strategically. The Institute of Emerging Leaders in Online Learning is the Online Learning Consortium's Facebook group. You can join them for free, IELOL, and people just ask questions, give advice. It's really wonderful to talk to people. LinkedIn connections and groups that were active that I joined. Unfortunately, not vendors for the external team. Internal team, yes, because we didn't want sales pitches yet. What we wanted was come together, come up with some ideas, share experiences, and then maybe do some research. Or maybe that individual institution will say, okay, I like that idea. Let me talk to this vendor, and then do it internally. Friends, colleagues, and sometimes people who don't agree with us, we added to the group. And I think I ended up with, it was a fluid roster over the last year. It started off with a very large group of about 400 or 500 people that met one meeting. And then it got smaller over time, more focused. There was no funding, of course, and monthly or on-demand meetings. So sometimes people will say, oh, I have a question, I have a problem. Can you all help me out? And then, either 3 or 4 of us or 30 of us would join a meeting on, Friday during lunchtime, and we would just talk through some stuff. And it was great planning for things we wanted to do for the future, especially during our budget season where we're trying to come up with, asking for money for things. That's the external team. You have the internal team and your external team, which are supporting the online learning unit that will help grow things for the future. COVID made this possible, this rapid response team, but I want to keep this team going, keep going. Very important. Do not forget about staff. We talk about faculty, we talk about students, we talk about leadership like deans and provosts and directors, but everybody else that's in there. We often forget about them. What are you doing to help support them? What is your school doing to support them now that they're working from home? Remember, staff are the people who are on campus the most of the time. They could be there 30 or 40 hours. Students and faculty are not necessarily there 30 or 40 hours. So that's really about staff. The next steps I would say for anybody watching this is let's form a post-conference online learning rapid response team. Let's do an external one. Reach out to me, reach out to your colleagues and say, hey, can we just meet and talk? If you are a vendor, you're always welcome to email me. I'm happy to listen. It may take me a couple of days to get back to your email sometimes, but try to, if you do attend any of these teams, just remember, we want to hear your insight into your experience, not necessarily selling something. We may go, hey, let's talk about your product, but certainly not as a leader on it. And that's it. I'm going to self-promote that I have a book. If you look on Amazon, look my name up. Not John Vivolo, who makes wood products for in the Smithsonian Museum. He's been dead for a long time. His name always comes up for some reason. If you look on Amazon, you can find my book. It's about managing online learning. It doesn't have anything about COVID, and I'll have to update it sometime in the next year or two. Any questions or anything? Let me stop sharing.
We do have a question, John, and I just want to say thank you so much before I ask that question. That was so full of thought and ideas, and I love the idea of an online learning rapid response team. I think that's brilliant. But we do have a question for you. We've only got a few more minutes, actually, but somebody's asking that you spoke about planning for 5 years' time, planning ahead for the future. And at the moment, there is a focus on flipped classroom styles and active learning. Do you anticipate that will be the same in 5 years, or do you think there will be new learning and teaching styles? If so, this is a hard one. What do you predict?
I think that the blended learning is a great approach, especially for people who are still resistant to online learning. We're not trying to get rid of on-campus learning, right? We're partnering with them. And especially if you're an engineer, I worked in engineering school at NYU for years, and there are some things you just can't turn online, and I get that. And even at the health at Katz, we have health things like occupational therapy. We know certain things can't go online, and we accept that. I think that now that people are willing to look at online learning when they weren't in the past because they had no choice, you had to go online, I think that's where you're going to see more changes in pedagogy and technology. That, hey, we got to do a better job doing biology labs online, chemistry labs online. We have some stuff now that's pretty good, but what's the next thing we can do? Not just because we have to do it, because we want to do it.
Interesting. Thank you. Okay, so I think we're coming towards the end then of our final session. Thank you very, very much, John. I think we really enjoyed that and really appreciate you sharing your thoughts. And you covered such a lot in such a short period of time. So many, many thanks indeed.
Thank you.
Okay, so I think then we have come to the end of what I would consider to be a really, really interesting day. We, at the start of this conference, as we opened it, I told you that I felt really optimistic about the future. And I can only say that this conference has reinforced that sense of optimism and positivity about where we are. I think the passion that all of the speakers and the panelists have shown, not just for their interest in online learning and blended learning, but for their students and for their colleagues, is absolutely phenomenal. And that just fills me with even more optimism for the future. We know it isn't going to be easy. We know there's lots of challenges, but I think what's really interesting is that despite us coming from all across the world, the globe, the challenges that we've experienced are very, very similar, actually, and we're all grappling with them, albeit in slightly different ways. It's impossible to predict the future, but I think we can safely say we're not going back. We don't want to go back. We're going into what I think somebody called, I can't remember what exactly, it wasn't the new normal, but somebody called it something very, very telling that I think that we will begin to adopt. So I think it's been great. I promised you a fascinating, stimulating and thought-provoking conference, and I certainly have felt that there's been so much on offer and such a wide range of things that my learning has developed enormously. I hope too that you've been able to participate in the things that have been happening outside of the speakers. I know there's been a lot going on, and many of you will be networking, you will be meeting colleagues. I do hope that you will keep up with those colleagues out of the after the conference, and that we'll carry on the various discussions that we've begun today. I think before we close, I do want to say that we are so lucky in higher and further education, particularly higher education, to work with such interesting colleagues who think ahead, who use their imagination, who are creative, and who think in unusual ways to overcome problems. And we've certainly seen that today. Long may that continue. I think that's what we're great as a sector. And I think that despite all the challenges that COVID has posed, that we will continue to do a fantastic job for our students. There is a lot to be done. There's a lot of things that have been raised today. Certain themes have emerged for me about the health of our learners, the health of our staff, how we help them look after themselves, how we manage some of the challenges, how we make sure that academic integrity is retained, and indeed how we continue. And this is a question I think that John has really encapsulated really well. How do we make sure that learning continues to be exciting and engaging for our learners? We simply cannot, we can't just do what we have always done, but I think we all know that. So thank you very, very much to all the speakers, all the presenters, all the panel who have given their time so generously, and thank you to all colleagues who have participated in the questions. You certainly made my life a lot easier because you've asked such interesting questions. And thank you very much also to Ed Online.